So I was reading an article on phys.org.com. It was a study done by Penn State about the population of teachers that basically advocate creationism in biology and science classes, or vice versa, those who basically endorse evolution. Now, the whole religious debate on YouTube has been really old, and but the article and study by the Penn State, I thought I would have to basically point out something that I think is pretty much commonly sort of missed in the whole religious debate, and it's really a sort of a flaw on both sides to sort of come to the fundamental differences on the foundations of their beliefs, which is that for atheists, I think what they need to understand is that God is all-powerful. Now, this allows him to do some pretty amazing things if you basically suspend your, disbelief in your reason and just say, okay, God is all-powerful. Because what atheists tend to do is they collect evidence and they basically say, this proves that God doesn't exist, or this proves that, that the Bible is false. When in fact what they have is a whole bunch of evidence, because if God was all-powerful, which, of course he is, he would be able to basically create the universe 2 seconds ago. So you weren't actually ever born, even though you have evidence that you were born. You have a memory of, of your childhood, but it was actually supplanted into your body by God, because God is all-powerful. So the mystery really sort of exists in the all-powerful God is basically, why did he create a whole bunch of evidence that basically contradicts his existence and what the Bible says? Because, the Bible would basically, has a certain timeline that theologians study, and the geologists and evolutionary biologists and anthropologists can basically, sort of go beyond that time frame and basically invalidate sort of the time frame that the Bible has. And one of the things that my dad had problems with is basically a lot of the science surrounding dinosaurs, because of course dinosaurs were pre-human, and it's entirely possible for an all-powerful God to basically create evidence of geological erosion spanning millions and millions of years, and that would sort of and maybe the theory of accretion disks and how planets form, which is in direct contradiction to how the Bible says that the world was created in 7 days and it was thing. Or you could go the whole what is 7 days to God, taking the Adventists versus sort of a metaphorical interpretation of the length of time that God needs to create the universe. But an all-powerful God could have just simply created it flat without anything and just planted the evidence in the ground and the geology, and that he doesn't exist, even though he did create it. So that's something I'd like for the atheist community to understand, is that if God is all-powerful, all of your proof and all of your evidence is basically invalidated under that sort of supernatural reasoning. So really what you do is you have a whole bunch of evidence that God doesn't exist, and you basically decide that that does in fact invalidate the Bible, and that he didn't create the universe. Or you basically simply believe. Now, one of the things that the Christian camp tends to do, and basically, people that believe in creation myths in general, is that they try to rationalize and prove the existence through basically reasoning techniques, which is, of course, exactly what the Bible kind of calls you not to do. It is through faith that you are called to believe, and it is through grace that you are saved. There is no reasoning or rationalizing yourself into heaven. So, in fact, I would probably suggest against it, since that was my main break from the church, is trying to reason my way into understanding the Bible, and the amount of contradictions that the book contains basically drove me away from the church and everything like that. I'm functionally an atheist now, but there is no necessarily proof to be had. Now, what this does is when you relate to what's being taught in the schools, where the Penn State study is that like 13% of the biological scientists are basically endorsing creationism, is really prioritizing belief over the foundation of science, which I have a problem with. I have a problem with science teachers embracing a non-science foundation for the foundations of like basic education and science for children. Because why can't you? I would state the fact that an all-powerful God could simply create all of the evidence to basically that evolution happens on an evidential level. That the geology of the Earth is several million years older than what the Bible would state, but you could just say that God created it that way. There's no rational conflict because you don't perpetuate your beliefs through reason. It's through faith. You believe. So stop trying to rationalize it, and really you should not put it in public education schools, not in beginning science classes. Really, we should definitely advocate and endorse evolution in science classes, because that is the scientific method, using physical evidence and inference, deduction, observation as the foundation for the scientific method, basically for verifiability. Did I say that right? I have no freaking idea. Anyway, so we have to get creationism out of science classes. I would definitely state that there is a conflict. I think that we should basically be very upfront about it and go ahead and go into the debate a little bit when you're presenting to kids, saying, culturally we believe this, we have the gods of Abraham, which basically includes Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those are all basically the face that came out of Abraham. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I really think that it's a bad thing that we're not endorsing science in science class. I'm not against saying, okay, there is no proof that evolution happens. There is no proof that the geological scale of the planet and the creation of the universe goes beyond and contradicts what the Bible is saying. What we do is have a substantial amount of evidence that seems to prove that. But if God was all powerful, He could have created it, a second ago. God all powerful is able to do this, and so I think the way to rationalize it, to basically put the creationism in its place, as far as when you're deciding to prioritize science above creationism and evolution above creation, you're not invalidating creationism. You're simply just saying one of these is a scientific theory and the other one is basically a cultural religious belief. This is a science class, this is not a church, so we're going to endorse the scientific model. And that's that. Wow, I've talked about this for 9 minutes. I gotta get off of here. Anyway, old debate. Sorry I took up your time with it, but whatever. Bye.